Question 17. Since the New Testament teaching on the submission of wives in marriage is found in the part of Scripture known as the household codes, Haustafeln, which were taken over in part from first-century culture, shouldn't we recognize that what Scripture is teaching us is not to offend against current culture, but to fit in with it up to a point, and thus be willing to change our practices of how men and women relate, rather than hold fast to a temporary first-century pattern? This is a more sophisticated form of the kind of questions already asked in questions 15 and 16. A few additional comments may be helpful. First, by way of explanation, the household codes refer to Ephesians chapter 5 verse 22 to chapter 6 verse 9, Colossians chapter 3 verse 18 to chapter 4 verse 1, and less exactly, 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 13 to chapter 3 verse 7. Passages that include instructions for pairs of household members, wives and husbands, children and parents, and slaves and masters. The first problem with this argument is that the parallels to these household codes in the surrounding world are not very close to what we have in the New Testament. It is not at all as though Paul simply took over either content or form from his culture. Both are very different from the non-biblical parallels that we know of. The second problem with this argument is that it maximizes what is incidental, the little that Paul's teaching has in common with the surrounding world, and minimizes what is utterly crucial, the radically Christian nature and foundation of what Paul teaches concerning marriage in the household codes. We have shown in questions 15 and 16 that Paul is hardly unreflective in saying some things that are superficially similar to the surrounding culture. He bases his teaching of headship on the nature of Christ's relation to the church, which he sees mysteriously revealed in Genesis chapter 2 verse 24. And thus in creation itself. We do not think that it honors the integrity of Paul, or the inspiration of Scripture, to claim that Paul resorted to arguing that his exhortations were rooted in the very order of creation, and in the work of Christ, in order to justify his sanctioning temporary accommodations to his culture. It is far more likely that the theological depth and divine inspiration of the apostle led him not only to be very discriminating in what he took over from the world, but also to sanction his ethical commands with creation only where they had abiding validity. Thus we believe that there is good reason to affirm the enduring applicability of Paul's pattern for marriage. Let the husband, as head of the home, love and lead as Christ as the church, and let the wife affirm that loving leadership as the church honors Christ.